Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jasmine and I lead the creative agency trusted by hundreds of female founders who have collectively generated over $50 million in revenue. And today we're going to discuss the top 7 questions that you should be asking, honestly, not just designers, but creatives in general before deciding to work with them. Part of my job is not just working and collaborating with other creatives for our own agency, but I do a lot of that work on behalf of clients, from videographers to brand photographers to event coordinators to literally anything and everything that you can think of. And so I have dialed down exactly what I like to ask in order to determine if someone is best fit for the type of work that we are looking for that I want you to use as well. The first question is, what is your process? And listen, I know if you are someone that is not in the niche, not in the industry, you're not a creative yourself, you might not necessarily understand the full extent of that process, but it's important that someone you work with has that. For me, an indicator whether someone is a good fit for a project or not isn't necessarily how many followers they have, how many projects that they've worked on, or even arguably their portfolio. What I have learned is to really find those hidden gems, those underrated creatives, the people that have the work ethic and the skill set and the creative talents to bring what we want to life. And it all starts with simply asking them, what is their creative process? Now, on my end as a creative, of course, I'm going to understand the nuances, but for you, it's important that you feel like they know what they're doing and they're not just winging it. They're not unsure. They have a very clear process that they feel confident about. Even if the work is custom, they should still have a general process, framework, method in which they walk clients through to see an end result. The second question is, how do they get to know your brand besides the surface level visual stuff like fonts and colors? A lot of times, again, when you're working with a designer specifically, it's really important that they understand your vision and obviously that they're able to expand on that vision on your behalf. There are a lot of things that if you are not a creative person yourself, if you don't understand, again, the fundamentals of the niche that you're investing in, you are relying on that person to not just be an expert in what they're doing, but also to be an advisor and a strategic partner, to not just be a yes woman and just say yes to every idea that you have, but instead collaborate and maybe even give you a little bit of pushback in terms of what things you should be doing and not doing. So for example, when I work with clients on shoots, there are so many times when clients give me ideas that honestly are a little bit basic or don't fit the vision or don't fit the overall scope of the project that we're working on in terms of their brand. And instead of just saying yes, because that's what the client asked for, I like to sometimes challenge the client, push back, and really ask them questions on why is this something that they're set on doing? What are they trying to communicate with that? What is the feeling that they're trying to invoke? And so with that, it's really important that the designer you're investing in can translate the things that are in between the lines and help you bring that to life. The third question is, I would focus on asking about timelines and what happens if either you or them miss it. So I think most of the time we think about our own schedule, our own calendar, our method of work, which yes, is important, but it's also making sure that the designer on the other end, the creative on the other end fits that mold. And so this is where people make a mistake in the sense of finding somebody who's absolutely fluid, has no boundaries, has no rigidity at all, where I see that more so as a red flag, because I'm a firm believer that a project needs to happen in one type of scope in a very specific timeline. It doesn't have to be one like 6-month or 12-month or whatever, but I do think when things go out of control, people lose that creative momentum. I think it's easy to then feel distracted by other creative ideas and you just kind of lose that like kind of fire that had you going into starting that project. So it's really important that you are aware of what that clear timeline is and how do you even like go back or bounce back when, let's say, you miss a deadline or they miss a deadline. So for example, when working with our agency, if there is a deadline that's missed, sometimes it is something that we can give a few days extension on, but for the most part, we charge the client an inconvenience fee is what we call it, because it normally requires us to push the project back. It normally requires dates to be rearranged. Sometimes there are other creatives involved that they have to charge a fee as well. So again, depending on the scope of the project, sometimes there are multiple things involved. And so you want to make sure that there is a clear timeline that helps you stay accountable. And a good follow-up question with that is, what systems do they have in place in order for you to be able to go through the project step by step? So for example, for our like bigger scope rebrand projects, there's a lot of moving parts. There's the branding part, the photo shoot component, the website design, revisions, all of the things. We have systems in place where everything is basically under one dashboard. There's a calendar for them to add. There are deadlines and email reminders for them that are scheduled to really help them feel supported throughout the process. The fourth question is asking, how do they go about feedback and revisions? And if you are a creative watching this, you are probably having all these bells and whistles go off, because sometimes that's a red flag. If a client is asking, hey, what's the revision process? How many times can I give feedback? This is a chance for two people on either end to come to terms to how the style of work is involved. And so with revisions, if you are someone that you are usually want things in a certain way, you want to make sure that things are done in a certain way, you have all of these like kind of micromanaging type of expectations, it's really important to understand what is the creative's kind of revision process, what is their collaboration process, what happens if you guys don't align on the vision, and most importantly, if you are someone on the other end and hiring a creative or hiring a designer, give the person a chance before you see the end result. I think it's so important for you to actually like trust in the process, which is why I'm giving you these lists of questions to ask, because it's not just about portfolio. It's not just about who they worked with. It's not just about the flashy things that you see. It's also understanding if they're the best fit for you behind all of those things. And when it comes to feedback, a lot of times what you're seeing on someone's end result portfolio, you have no idea the revision rounds involved, the commentary, you have no idea what the actual like meat of that project looked like and what the behind the scenes of that project looked like. Something I like to tell clients is like, hey, you mentioned these are the top, portfolio pieces that you're referencing, but did you know that that end goal looked nothing like the first piece of work that we put together, or looked nothing like the brief? And there were so many things that we ended up changing and things we ended up collaborating on within the, determined scopes of revision. And I think this is also where people freak out if they receive work and they don't like it at the first try. But that is exactly why revision rounds are set in place by designers, by creatives to begin with, is to give you the opportunity to give feedback. That is literally why they exist. If we thought we were going to get it right 100% of the time on the first try, sure, we wouldn't add that in and we would just be super confident and have that out. But we know that this is a collaborative process. So obviously there are things in place to do that. So it's really important that you ask about how that process goes. And honestly, just be upfront with your designer or creative and say, hey, here are my concerns. Here's usually where I get stuck. What methods in your process do you have that can help support me with that? And designers and creatives, if you are watching this and you are realizing I don't have answers to a lot of these people's questions, that is not about entitlement. That is not about you thinking you're more worthy or you're better than, or they're not the right fit client. These are just normal thoughts that people have when people are not in our niche and in our industry and doing this on a day-to-day basis. The next question is really about more so scope, but I would definitely ask, how is this going to support me beyond just the reveal of the actual assets? So for example, if you are getting photos delivered, ask them, how would these be utilized outside of just sitting in a gallery or me posting them solo? If you are someone that's getting a rebrand, asking them, how can I make sure that this is still creating results even after my announcement day? The next question is really asking about what is the communication method handled within the project. Most people think that this is something that they shouldn't necessarily be concerned over, but I have had clients expect day-to-day updates, and I have had clients that think day-to-day updates or weekly updates or even monthly updates are too much and don't want to be involved. So I would ask about what is their communication style, and I would be transparent about how you are planning on being involved in the scope of the project. This is really important because I have worked with clients who want to be the first to know. They're the point of contact. They want to be updated line by line in terms of what is going on. And I have had clients that are so far removed. I'm working with their team member. They're not really involved. They're just giving the final say. So it's also important on both ends to be really honest about where you fit into that. And so for communication style, I think, again, it's not necessarily about trying to control the other creative's process, but it's about understanding it. So for example, when you work with us, we work with a lot of female founders who are very busy on a day-to-day basis. Their email is blowing up, their Slack channels, they are receiving ample amounts of communication at all times. And even their team members are busy handling things on their behalf. So it doesn't make sense for us to give daily or even weekly updates. So what we do is give them milestone-based updates, which means that when you're onboarded and working with us, literally from the moment you're onboarded, you have a list of when you can expect to hear from us based on each milestone. You also have the ability to reach out to us with any questions or concerns along the way. But for the most part, we only reach out to you if it's something that we need at a certain milestone phase, and we communicate that right off the bat. So you're not getting flooded with notifications and requests, and you can focus on your business while also working on the creative project with us. So you get to ask what their communication style is, determine if it works for you, and then go from there. The next question is a question that we get often, but honestly, our portfolio work speaks on our behalf because we have such a wide range of design styles and looks that are catered and unique to each client. We don't necessarily templatize our approach when it comes to creativity. And so one question that you should be asking a designer, whether they have a super wide range portfolio, or maybe they're known for a very specific style, which is aligned to what you're wanting, and that's why you're reaching out to them. It's really important that you ask them what their approach approach is when it comes to making your work stand out. So this is different than the first question, which asks them about their overall process. That first question was for you to know, do they have something in place that they walk clients through that's pretty routine, or are they just thinking of things out of the air and just winging it? Versus this question is more specific about what their method entails in helping you stand out. And this is also important because you don't want to feel like you are just a repurposed version of somebody else that they did. You don't want to get the end result and realize, oh, there are 3 people in my industry that are already doing this. I already feel behind on this trend. I'm already feeling outdated in my brand or in my creative work. So this is a good way for them to articulate what is kind of unique about their approach. The final question, and creatives will thank me for this, is asking them, what is required of me for this project to be successful, or what is required of me for me to see the best ROI? I have seen horror stories from both ends, from creatives and clients on either end, communicating about the lack of expectations, the lack of fulfillment, feeling underwhelmed, not loving the results. And sometimes it's the creative's fault, but sometimes it's also the client's fault. And this is again where communication and alignment on expectations just didn't meet. So it's really important for you to actually ask the person on the other end, hey, what do you need from me in order for this to be successful? And for me, I tell the clients 2 things. Number 1, I just want the client to be open, because a lot of times we're going to show them things that they probably never thought of, never thought to look into, maybe even, gets them outside of their comfort zone. It is not uncommon for clients to work with us and realize that this creative project is turning into a whole identity shift. They're discovering themselves in new ways. They're exploring things outside of their comfort zone. They're working on testing things that they've never done before in their business. And that is completely normal. All I ask is for the opportunity for them to be open. And number 2, I ask them to not be afraid to ask questions. And there's a difference between asking questions because you don't trust the process, you're trying to micromanage, you're trying to minimize, you don't have respect for the person, you are, just trying to make the process yours. That is completely different. Asking questions just means that if you are unclear or unsure or feeling hesitant, ask questions just to get that clarity. And a lot of times people will just say, I trust you, but can you just explain this? I trust you, but can you explain why we're doing this decision over this? I trust you, but here are my thoughts, right? So being open to the process, being open to the discovery, the exploration, the journey that you're going to go on, and then obviously asking questions along the way, for us makes you such a great candidate, makes you an ideal client. And especially if you are someone that's just willing to trust the process, literally until offboarding. We are most of the time willing to work with clients to ensure that the project is successful. And so it's also about giving the creative a chance to actually work through their method, their process, and see that work to completion. And so I think asking them, hey, what do you need from me to make the project successful, kind of flips the script, and it allows for them to tell you how to be a good client. So with these 7 questions, you'll be able to figure out if someone is worth hiring or if it's kind of going to be a headache, not necessarily because they're a bad designer, but because their process doesn't fit for you. Again, from the horror stories I've heard on both ends, it's a lot of times people that just look at the surface level things. You're just looking at the portfolio, you're just looking at the deliverables, you're just looking at the highlight reel versus actually figuring out if their process is something that works for you. And like I said, be open. You're not going to find a creative that 100% matches exactly what you're looking for. The goal is for you to find somebody that you're willing to mold yourself into becoming. Most of the time, if you're working with an agency like ours, we're experts. We've done this dozens and dozens of times. We've customized it in multiple different ways for clients. And at the end of the day, we know that this is the process that works. And so it's figuring out, okay, what do I need to do in order to become successful at that project? Which again is where that last question really comes in handy.